Hey, well, what's up, guys? Welcome back to The Collision. Daniel here to talk about the new film Piece by Piece, the Lego movie biopic of artist Pharrell Williams. Yes, this is a weird one. It's in theaters now. I have seen it, so let's talk about it. So if you have ever had the yearning to see Snoop Dogg appear as a literal dog, smoking weed in a PG animated Lego movie, then Piece by Piece is here to scratch that very oddly specific itch. Because like I said, this is a weird movie. This is one that I didn't really know what to expect going in. It's like a biopic, but it's also a Lego movie, and didn't really know who exactly this movie is for. I do think at a time where Hollywood seems to struggle to just generate new ideas, making like a talking heads documentary, made in the framework of a very colorful Lego movie is undeniably fresh. It is unique. Yet, as all musical artists know, not every promising new beat or creative spark will lead inevitably to a hit song. And that's the case with this movie. I'm mixed with this film. I think the Lego aesthetic is very vibrant. It is fun. And I do think fans of the kind of very sprawling cast of musical artists will likely enjoy kind of revisiting their career histories. But overall, this is just like a mostly adult-oriented vanity project that just doesn't seem to have a whole lot to say. But before we get into this, a very quick and necessary disclaimer. At last I checked, I currently have 8,309 songs in my iTunes library, and roughly 99% of those are by European power metal bands. Think like the Venn diagram of my personal music taste and the music that is represented by the movie Piece by Piece are two separate and non-touching circles, which just means that I'm not in the target audience that will get like a buzz out about seeing like Lego renditions of people like Busta Rhymes and Pusha T. I suspect that this is a film that will land differently, probably more positively by those who, love the artists and the music that it depicts. But unfortunately, it just doesn't have a ton to offer for anyone that doesn't already have that kind of pre-existing nostalgia or affection. But I do think Piece by Piece is a movie defined by very surprising contrasts. Making a musical documentary as a Lego movie is a very out of the box creative decision. And in many respects, I do think that decision pays off. The film's very bright and vibrant colors are just a total delight. I think while lacking some of the more comedic tone of the earlier Lego movies, the film also does play off of its very playful potential of Lego in amusing ways. And it is kind of a byproduct of making this an animated film, is that it does allow for the recreation of historical events that just would not have been possible in a more live action, real life documentary. In the same way, Piece by Piece may be a movie created with Lego visuals, but it's not a Lego movie in the same sense that sort of the previous Lego movies were. I think to start, Universal Pictures bought the rights for the Lego movies from Warner Brothers in 2020. So this is an entirely different studio group of creatives that, than the one that created the hits like the Lego movie or the Lego Batman movie. And while those earlier beloved Lego movies had a very zany tone that was aimed primarily at younger audiences, Piece by Piece is not really a kids movie. It features a bit more of a serious tone. It has profanity and I think just adult themes that will appeal more to older viewers. Although at times the movie does seem to dance around the more adult aspects of its story in order to make itself accessible to younger viewers, such as bleeping out profane words with a poop emoji, or having characters spray PG spray to fill the room with smoke as they're getting high with Snoop Dogg. But even beyond some of the content, I'm just not sure this is a story that is going to keep the attention of younger viewers, as it is kind of comprised more of a series of interviews and inside industry scoops rather than a very clear and compelling narrative. Of course, in recent years, Lego has become much more than just a mere child's pastime. Piece by Piece as a movie doesn't necessarily have to be aimed at kids, even if that audience expectation, especially going off of a poster like this, is completely understandable. But the problem with this film kind of aiming more at adults than children is that it's just simply not all that interesting as a character exploration of Pharrell Williams either. The film deposits a lot of information about Pharrell, and as an ignorant metalhead that I am, I did find some of these glimpses into the inner workings of the hip hop industry intriguing. But the film does lack an overarching story, and instead it takes more of a Wikipedia page approach of just sort of simply progressing through his musical career and seeming to just check off the boxes along the way of the various milestones. And that way, this movie is arguably more about what Pharrell Williams accomplished rather than who he is. And I think kind of like the Wikipedia page approach does lead to several like kind of narrative detours, such as like the death of his grandma, and also kind of the impact of the Black Lives Matter movement and marches. And like both of those events presumably had a very profound impact on his life. It's just that the movie doesn't explore how that is the case. At one point, Pharrell briefly verbalizes, that the Black Lives Matter movement, made him realize the importance of his racial identity. But then that thread is dropped and never revisited. And kind of as a result, events like that, and there are many others in this film, come across more like just checking off the next boxes along like the chronological pathway of Pharrell's life, rather than kind of having any sort of thematic unity that strings them together or puts them in context. I'll also note, and maybe this is a personal pet peeve grudge of mine, that I am typically skeptical of like documentaries that are produced by the person that it conveys, as often they just tend to come across as very like manufactured PR spins, and that is definitely applying here as well. I think other than like one or two brief hints of shortcomings or failures, almost every scene in this movie features people just praising Pharrell Williams as the singular genius and trailblazing prodigy that he is. I think kind of despite a later, attempted message about the danger of an inflated ego, there is like a very unavoidable degree of just vanity at the center of this film's creation that almost reminded me of like a stereotypical, influencer's Instagram account where it does present like a snapshot of their life, but it's just one that seems very clearly and meticulously curated and edited to present an almost like fantasy-like vision of that life. As far as content to consider, things going on the surface of this, for language, there is profanity. I might not have an exact count, but by my reckoning, there are at least like 5 to 6 uses of the S word, with maybe 1 or 2 of those, like I mentioned, bleeped out with the poop emoji. And then there's also a few instances of, words that begin with H and D, and at least a couple utterances of God or oh my God. For violence, this is a Lego movie. There is no violence in this film. As far as sexuality, there is like the recreation of several popular music videos, which do feature kind of, women dancing around in somewhat revealing clothing, although obviously they're all Lego characters, so not overly concerning in that way. I'll also say that the lyrics of some of the songs that are played throughout the movie, such as the song Good Girl, also features very explicit, language and, sexual material. Although I think most, as far as I could tell, most of like the more problematic, lyrics of those songs weren't actually played in the film. The only other content thing is there are several times where characters drink like Lego alcohol, and the scene I mentioned earlier where they spray PG spray in the room, which is clearly intended to stand in for marijuana. As far as themes, worldview, things going on beneath the surface of this, I think probably the most interesting aspect, at least for Christian viewers, is the inclusion of Pharrell's faith and spirituality. Because at the beginning of this film, there's sort of a voiceover where he remarks that, because the life and the world that we live in was all created, there's not necessarily anything new, but we can kind of take what already exists and rearrange it and recreate, pieces of beauty. There are also several scenes that are set within a church, as Pharrell has conversations both with his pastor and with his grandmother about, faith and spiritual things and sort of their conviction that God has, a special plan for his life. And even kind of bookending this film at the very end, Pharrell's looking out over a Lego ocean, and kind of one of the last lines he remarks that it's kind of that sublime realization that all of this was designed. At the same time, those like spiritual leanings are joined by more like naturalistic thoughts, because famous scientist Carl Sagan is shown to be a very prominent influence on Pharrell's life. And there's a pivotal moment in this film where Pharrell is listening to a speech given by Sagan, in which the scientist says, "Our posturings, our imagined self-importance, the delusion that we have some privileged position in the universe, are challenged by this point of pale light. Our planet is on a lonely speck in the great enveloping cosmic dark. In our obscurity and all of this vastness, there is no hint that help will come from elsewhere to save us from ourselves," which is a quote from Sagan's famous book, A Pale Blue Dot. And sort of those two contrasting ideas are held in tension throughout this film and left unresolved. Because either everything was beautifully and purposely created, or it is the insignificant result of just random chance. Pharrell seems to think that God has an important will and purpose for his life, but that Sagan moment and quote implies that there is no sort of governing higher power or privilege for human beings. I think Pharrell, at least as it's depicted in this film, seems to believe in God, and he regularly in the film gives credit to God for his talents. Yet there's also kind of like a humanistic, even even hedonistic element at times where it seems like most of the actions in his life do seem more driven by just sort of ambition and the desire to become successful. And it's only with like the creation of his hit song Happy, where he is overcome with emotion at the thought of being able to spread joy around the world. Only then is there become like a clear sense that sort of those God-given gifts are being used in a way to edify others, beyond just chasing his own personal ambitions. But I think regardless of maybe some of the mixed messaging in that, it is refreshing to see, an artist's faith so openly proclaimed and explored in a film. In the end, I remain almost as mystified having seen this film as I did going into the theater. I think kind of fitting for the type of, unorthodox thinker that Pharrell Williams seems to be, Piece by Piece is like no other film that I think I've ever seen before. And I do think, if nothing else, it should be commended for that. I think hip hop fans will have fun journeying through, the genre's recent history and just seeing the many cameos of industry superstars. But I think for those that don't have a pre-existing attachment to the music, or for parents that are looking for entertainment, wholesome entertainment for their kids, they might be better off pushing skip track on this one. But hey, I would love to hear what you think. If you see this movie, if you love Pharrell Williams, or you're trying to take your kids, or whatever the reason, don't be shy. Jump into the comment section. Let's have a conversation about this. If you haven't done so too, encourage you guys, subscribe to the channel, become a collider. Get lots of movie reviews and our faith and pop culture podcast and interviews and just other fun stuff. Would love to have you be a part of that. But most of all, guys, thank you for watching. Stay safe and continue to collide through a world for Christ.